Hey guys, GhazzyTV here with another Path of Exile build guide. I think I've found my favorite League starter build. Now this build is so straightforward, easy and cheap to gear as well as to understand, and it is extremely tanky. Now check the timestamps available in the pinned messages below the video for more details about the guide. However, we're going to break the build down to its basics, and it's pretty much like this. The build is using Dominating Blow with the assistance of a Writhing Jar Flask, also known as the Worm Flask, to help generate the Snowball, which will just roll by itself from there. We're also using Smite for the sake of generating the aura it provides to your minions. Now speaking of auras, we are using the new Herald of Purity, which also grants us additional minions, as well as Hatred, which scales our physical damage dealing minions the best. Now gear wise, it is also extremely straightforward. It puts other League starter builds to shame. You want to use a Brightbeak for that insane leap slam speed, as well as a Tabula Rasa. Now the weapon can be replaced with anything that grants you extra attack speed, which makes this build extremely solo self-found viable. Now the Tabula Rasa will later on be replaced by a 6-link Belly of the Beast, which kind of sets the bar for what type of gear you want to use for your character. Now there are a lot of options you can take from here, however the most basic is what you want, and that's rare items with tons of life and resistances on them, and that's really it. The offensive focus of this build is focused around minions, which can be traced back to the Ascendancy choices on the Templar Guardian. However, the last two lab point choices grant your character charges, and note that the charges do not affect your minions because they're counted as allies and not party members. However, this gives you endurance charges, frenzy, and power charges, and this is mainly to increase your leap slamming clear speed as well as a defensive aspect, which is also something you can see from the last two lab choices, where you're getting a lot of extra life regen as well as the extra endurance charges, and the first two choices being oriented around minions also has a small note of giving you extra life regen. Now the build's main defensive focuses are oriented around having a high life pool with the crazy life regen. Even in decent gear, you'll be regenerating above 1000 life per second. Now, as great as this build might seem, once you've hit higher levels, you will still have to go through the first 10 acts, which was super smooth. It took me about 6 hours to hit Blood Aqueduct, mainly using Dominating Blow since level 28. However, I did feel it could have gone faster using Smite combined with Herald of Purity, but once I got a Brightbeak later on, it was alright to level with Dominating Blow, but I must say that I would highly recommend using Smite till you hit about level 70 and then switch to DB as you go into maps. Also, stopping to farm for a Tabula Rasa via the Divination cards and Blood Aqueduct is something I highly recommend. It makes lab runs smooth when it comes to the Merciless and also the Crew Lab, which I didn't do till after Blood Aqueduct, and also makes Kitava in Act 10, even using Dominating Blow for as a main skill, pretty damn smooth. Something I will mention though is that even if you have a lot of life regen, make sure you don't make mistakes like in the current League of Delve, diving into shadows thinking you're fine because you're gonna regen so much, because it can end up with you dying in a hardcore league. Let's go through things more in detail, starting with the leveling and skill tree. So I'm going to go through the skill tree real quick and basically how I progressed it. As you're starting off as a Templar, you want to go for the damage and mana and damage nodes through the attack and minion damage nodes till you hit Retribution. Now at this point I took a little bit of a deviation from the original endgame tree by simply picking up the life through Discipline and Training, and then I went in through the elemental damage nodes, Holy Dominion, as well as picking up Divine Fervor. And then I crossed over into Devotion. I went from here all the way up to get the minion nodes, mainly aiming at Spiritual Aid, which increases and which gives you the increase and reduction to minion damage to also apply to you. Now once you got to this point, all of the damage nodes that you get on the tree, including the ones here at the start, including Retribution, will actually be giving you a lot of damage. Now at this point I decided to go into the Purity of Flesh node to further reach Sacrifice and Spiritual Command. Now I didn't pick up Sacrifice early on because I didn't really feel the need for it, so I rushed over to Spiritual Command. This one gives you increases and reductions to minion attack speed to affect you, allowing you to further scale the efficiency of your leveling route. Now once I picked up Spiritual Command, I actually did deviate slightly to go over to Resolute Techniques. Now once I've reached this point, I felt a lot of issues regarding my mana cost, so I used a mana flask to help me sustain it. You could use Clarity Aura as well, so I started by rushing over to Quick Recovery to help me with that little extra mana regen. Now once I've reached Quick Recovery, you have pretty much two different choices. Either you go in here to the Witch area start to get some extra life, and also life plus some resistances, but also some extra damage, which is about 45% increased minion damage and a little bit of extra attack speed. Now if you feel that you don't really need the offense or the resistances is that's pressing, then you can just keep moving down here for even more resistances, or take the choice to move into the side to help you with some much needed dexterity later on through the expertise node, as well as some reduced mana cost and tireless, which can be another issue you might run into when feeling it to be really annoying to use the mana flask. And then tireless can be a more optimal node to rush in your case. And after this, it's basically just getting more life nodes, and even more life regen, and even more life nodes, and then more life nodes, and then basically you get the potency of will and skill effect duration node, as well as picking up Grave Pact for more damage. As you noticed, I managed to rip this character at level 77, so I didn't actually reach Grave Pact. However, I didn't really feel like I needed it during the parts I was using this build for, and simply went for more life. However, the gear I'm using is currently atrocious in terms of HP, and despite that I actually still managed to get 5000 HP with the Tabula Rasa. I grabbed 5.6k with a belly. However, when you're leveling this build, you have to see it and feel for yourself. If you're in need of more damage, then you have to rush into a little bit more minion damage nodes and whatnot. And if you feel like you're fine and it's more about your survival, then you prioritize HP and resistances, for example, Crew Preparation or Barbarism nodes. And if you feel that those parts are fine and it's more about your mana issue, then you kind of want to rush Tireless. But in the start, to repeat myself, damage nodes, minion damage, Retribution, Discipline Training, Holy Dominion and Divine Fervor, towards Devotion, and after this you rush for Spiritual Aid, life into the Spiritual Command, and at this point you want to pick up Resolute Techniques and then Quick Recovery. So once you reach this point, you can either go in for more HP and resistances, which is either in the Witch area or down in Barbarism if you want to rush it, and then you can go for mana easy, smoothness, so to say, and Tireless, or can just go for more HP nodes. So there's a lot of options you can take from that point. When it comes to the leveling skills, it's a bit different. You could use Dominating Blow, which I used. Took about a little bit over 6 hours to reach Blood Aqueduct, which was pretty okay, considering. However, I do believe you can meet this Blood Aqueduct reaching in 6 hours much faster if you decide to use something like Smite. Now, Smite is a pretty cool ability. This is how it looks using a Bright Beak. What's so cool about it is that it's a lightning attack, AoE duration, melee, and aura ability. Now the way I'm using it is simply to have it linked together with generosity and faster attacks, and I have hatred in there as well. So basically what happens when I hit something with my smite is that I'm generating an aura that increases damage to my minions and their chance to shock. So that's the only reason I'm using Smite. So in the gameplay video that you saw before, in the gameplay footage, you were able to see me use Smite every now and then just to pop this aura, but in general I was using my Dominating Blow attack. When you're leveling with Smite, you kind of want to do damage, and it's much easier to have Ancestral Call because it's much easier to reach targets using Ancestral Call. This is something that is part of the main link to Dominating Blow, which we'll be talking about in a bit. But basically, Ancestral Call allows you to reach them much smoother and hit more targets, which makes Smite kind of really awesome to use, to be honest. And I want to combine this with faster attacks and melee physical for extra damage output. Now these are the main 4 link for the actual damage. However, during this time as you're leveling with this, since you reach level 16 in Act 2, you're able to pick up Herald of Purity. This is something you want to combine, and when you're supporting this Herald with extra support gems, it will take more than the stated 25% reservation. An example is what I have on my Herald of Purity is a maim and minion damage. Now you could use something like blind and whatnot, but I have that with my Holy Relic, but more about these links later. So it should state that it should reserve 25%, but because it is supported by 2 support skills, my Herald of Purity is currently reserving 37%. So you have to be a little bit careful with your links with Herald of Purity. in case you want to use other auras such as Hatred, or in case you want to use Clarity. I personally didn't feel the need of it, so I think that personally it would be best to use only Herald of Purity together with Melee Splash and melee physical damage as well as minion damage, because of the minions it spawns from the Herald of Purity is insanely effective, and this was very smooth to level with. Even versus bosses, it was very easy to handle. It felt very good. Now once you've reached Blood Aqueduct, no matter how you decide to level, if you haven't got a Bright Peak weapon, you can always get anything that gives you increased attack speed. Keep in mind that the base attack speed of a weapon does not apply to Leap Slam or Shield Charge, whichever movement skill you decide to use. But if you have increased attack speed on the weapon, where Bright Peak is the best in the game, you can have that instead to make your Leap Slam very smooth. Keep also in mind that Leap Slam, unlike Shield Charge, does not scale for movement speed, so if I pop my Quicksilver, it does not change the attack speed or the movement speed of my Leap Slam. But it was very smooth to level this way. And at Blood Aqueduct you want to farm the divination cards called Humility, which after 9 cards gives you a Tabula Rasa, and once you've gotten that, you're free to go for the rest of the game, and everything else will be about your gear. Once you've reached the highest level, we're going to talk about the endgame links when you moved over to using Dominating Blow. Now we're going to go through everything in detail, so let's start with the mobility in the Bright Peak or whichever weapon you happen to be using. We are linking Leap Slam together with Fortify as well as faster attacks. Now you don't have to level up Leap Slam, as it doesn't actually do anything more than cost a lot more mana, so keep this one in the low level and link it with Fortify and faster attacks. In my shield I have, which is really bad without life as you've noticed, I have my very simple cast with damage taken setup. In here we have cast with damage taken. My personal preference is level 3, which supports skills up to level 42 or lower. However, the level of cast and damage taken support is freely up to you, whichever you prefer. I'm linking it with a low level convocation, which allows me to have all my minions summoned on me when I've taken the threshold damage for the cast of damage taken to proc. Now this means that it will not be able to be interrupted, because when I've taken the damage, this ability will be cast and all my minions will surround me, helping me survive and also move in my minions for the offensive leap, which will allow me to actually leap slap into the midst of fight and go into heavy packs, knowing that once my cast for damage taken procs, all my minions will be on me, which is a very smooth and effective way to play. I'm also linking it with the more obvious Immortal Call. Now keep in mind, for those people who have been asking me several times throughout the years, you can have Immortal Call even if you don't have endurance charges. So the problem is that it will only have a base duration of what you can see here being 0.4 seconds. Now this is scaled obviously from increased duration modifiers. So if we're taking a look at my Immortal Call here, you can see that the duration is 0.58 seconds thanks to my skill tree. Now this is obviously increased by 112% per endurance charge that I have. Now the thing is, why we're using this is to avoid getting completely instigated by porcupines, for example, or bone husks later on, which are spiky spike damage that comes from a lot of sources. So what happens is when they hit you, the first 1 or 2 hits will proc the Immortal Call, and you will not take more damage after that is procced, which is why we're using this setup. And then once we get the endurance charge, we're going to get another 300% increased duration, so we're going to have a couple of seconds of immortality versus physical damage, making this a very tanky build once you get things started. The other links I'm using is currently a Holy Relic, and what's so cool about the Holy Relic is that this little minion does not attack, it follows you around, but it has an attack. So basically, whenever you hit an enemy, the Holy Relic will trigger a Nova spell that will deal physical damage to enemies and give you and your allies life regeneration, which is one of the most focused defensive aspects of this build. Now, the life regeneration has a significantly higher value when applied to minions than it is to yourself, which is why I haven't focused too much on minion life or minion leech or even minion regen nodes on the tree, because this one fixes that for you pretty much single-handedly. The Nova spell has a very short cooldown, so this one procs quite often when you're hitting something, And basically what I've done with this, I've linked it together with Stone Golem and having a blind support. So both my Golem and my Nova, whenever I hit something, so my Holy Relic and my Golem will actually be blinding the enemies, which again emphasizes on being a tanky build, as the enemies will barely be hitting you. Now I have this linked with increased duration to increase it, but this one is supposed to be an increased AoE. I just didn't happen to get the right colors before I rigged my character. So again, Holy Relic, Summon Ghost Stone Golem, supporting them with blind and increased AoE. The slam ability from the Golem will actually scale its AoE from the support gem, but it's mainly used together for the Holy Relic. If you want to, you can remove the Golem and have a third support gem for the Relic, or even have something else if you so wish. The other support which I mentioned earlier was the Smite, which I have linked with Generosity and faster attacks. And this is also combined with Hatred in this piece, and where you put them in the gear doesn't really matter. And the Hatred Generosity is basically so that you are augmenting the aura to be better and stronger for your minions, but it will no longer affect you. The same goes for the reason to linking it to Smite, because Smite is generating an aura granting extra chance to shock as well as extra added flat lightning damage. So we are using this to generate extra damage for our minions through Smite, which is then on a Generosity aura, meaning it will be augmented but no longer affect you as a player. The reason I've done this is because this build I've designed is not to deal damage, it is to make our minions deal as much damage as possible. The last 4-link is a Herald of Purity. Now there's a couple of things you can do here. This is how I prefer to try it out for the sake of damage output, but there's a lot of options. One of them is, for example, to use the blind support together with Herald, but my version is to use a Herald of Purity linked with Maim. And the reason we're using Maim is to allow the Maim support and the minions from Herald of Purity to have that support gem, which will allow us to have better damage support gems for our Dominating Blow 6-link, as we no longer have to use Maim in there because the enemies are already maimed through Herald of Purity. I'm obviously linking them with minion damage, however, you can use other things if you so wish. I didn't feel them to be significantly amazing, to be honest, but I also felt kind of limited in how much I could reserve with this specific build without investing to aura nodes. However, the SMS Notes from the skill tree of the Templar is allowing us to do things in a different way. But this is how I decided to do it, and the last one was a portal gem. Now, when it comes to the Dominating Blow 6-link, what I went to do was a Dominating Blow and linking it with Multi-Strike. This was to help out with the mana cost of the ability, but it was also a very optimal support gem for the damage output of your minions. And this is linked with added fire and minion damage, as well as melee physical damage, but most importantly, Ancestral Call. Now, I mentioned Ancestral Call earlier together with Smite for leveling, because of the fact that Ancestral Call is, unlike Splash, does not just happen in the area where you are. Ancestral Call has a pretty wide radius, so that when you're hitting something, your Ancestral Call proc to hit 2 nearby enemies is quite big, this radius, allowing you to hit rare enemies or even blue pack or other enemies that you want to reach without going too close to them, which could be an issue when you have a lot of damage output that you might not reach the rare guy that you want to hit to be able to dominate that specific minion. Ancestral Call helps you with this and is very, very smooth to use. Now, speaking of the SMS Notes, I will mention them in this little segment here. And what we're doing is that we're going to start off with taking the Radiant Crusade node, which is also one of the reasons why focusing on Smite and Herald of Purity is so strong when you're leveling. And that's because you and the allies affected by your aura skills deals 20% increased damage. You also have 10% more damage while you have at least one nearby ally. This helps very well when you're leveling and using Smite as an actual damage ability. And Herald of Purity has 40% increased buff effect, again emphasizing on the damage you get from it. And the Sentinels of Purity has increased area of effect with their slams, which actually is really, really good. Crew Lab, you want to pick up the armor and shield minion damage and get Unwavering Crusade. Now this is where the fun starts, because a 10% increased area of effect for each summoned Sentinel of Purity and means that your Smite will have a pretty wide radius when you're leveling up. And the Summoned Sentinels also uses a Crusade Slam, which happens fairly often and is a pretty goddamn good AoE clearing. And they also give a 100% minion accuracy rating. Now please note that accuracy rating does not affect you, which is why we're using rest of the techniques. Minions intimidate enemies for 4 seconds, and basically what that means is that enemies will take 10% increased attack damage, and recently refers to the last 4 seconds, which is stated in the bottom. Now this is really good because it increases the damage the enemy takes by your minions hitting enemies. Which is very nicely combined with something like a taunt on hit duel, which you can use in a later stage. But this is all written in the forum thread for, you know, a more extreme detailed description. Now, if you've hit an enemy recently, both you and nearby allies will also regenerate 3% of life per second. This is one of the best nodes I've seen in a long time, because it gives so much offensive power for your heralds and yourself and the accuracy rating, as well as giving you a massive defensive bonus. As I mentioned earlier, the build is focused defense is oriented around life regen and having a high life pool. This is one of the parts building up to that. So 3% life for you and your minion is extremely viable. The third lab is a little bit questionable because there's basically 3 options from the route that I prefer to take, which is either going for Bastion of Hope, giving you a lot of block chance to you and your minions. If you cast a spell recently, your allies will have increased block chance, and if you attack, they will get a block chance to attacks. Basically, I felt that this node was a little bit meh, and I've never really appreciated block builds in this game, so I decided not to take this, but there are people who actually appreciate it, so this is an option for you guys. However, you can choose between Time of Need, reducing the effect of curses on you, which I feel is a bit whatever, because if curses is an issue, then you want to use a Warding Flask. However, every 5 seconds it does remove curses and elemental ailments, and also give you 30% if your max life regenerated over 1 second. So pretty much every 5 seconds you get full HP. And the other choice, which is what I took from my Merc lab, is Harmony of Purpose. Nearby enemies cannot gain Power Frenzy Endurance charges, which is, yeah, it's a pretty nice thing considering you're going to be in the melee range of enemies for the ones that can generate these, which is pretty good versus Isara, for example, in his charges. However, you and nearby party members share Power Frenzy Endurance charges with each other. Now keep in mind that node refers to party members. This does not apply to allies, which are considered minions. Minions are allies, so this does not affect minions. There's a 10% chance to gain a Power Frenzy or Endurance charge on hit. So the reason we take this is to increase our clear speed through Frenzy by leaf slamming faster. The power charges are wasted, but the Endurance charges are, as mentioned earlier as well, to increase the duration of our Immortal Call, and even when our Immortal Call is not proccing, it gives us a massive defensive layer versus physical damage. I usually want to take the Harmony of Purpose, and on the last lab pick up Time of Need. That is pretty much it, and I hope you guys enjoyed the guide, and we'll have tons of fun in raid class playing this build. Since this build offers a lot of diversity, and the fact that this build guide is focused mainly around a league starter approach, being a very cheap and effective starting build, I would love to hear what you guys have for versions and what you're playing with the Dominating Blow. So let me know in the comments below with your approaches, because I'd love to hear this. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content. Until next time, boys, stay safe and keep rocking.